In 2004, Jim Collins and his colleague Jerry Parros released a book titled Built to Last. This is a book that took the management leadership world by storm. So what they did in this book is they studied 18 seemingly successful organizations in America. And they presented the research or the body of knowledge that they developed as a blueprint. So that if you implemented some of the things that are entailed in the book, they would set your business on a roadmap to success. It would be interesting to go back now and look at, 20-something years down the road, whether these organizations are still thriving and whether the ideas that were contained in the book still hold true. So one surprising thing, especially about Jim Collins, who was the author of this book, is a lot of people thought that he is a business guru, somebody who is an academician in the business area. But he's quick to always state that this was just a research work that he was involved in. He could have been researching any other field, but it just happened that he was looking at business success and the things that set up a business for success. So what we want to do today is look at an enterprise that in my mind is way more successful than any of the 18 that Jim and Jerry looked at in their book Built to Last. We want to look at an organization or an enterprise that has been there for much, much longer, way beyond the time that these 18 have been around. An organization or a business or an enterprise that has been there for over 2,000 years, and look at some of the traits, especially when it comes to how the business or the enterprise was structured, and see if we can learn anything from there. Now, you might be wondering which business is this I'm talking about, or which enterprise this is that I'm referring to that has been around for over 2,000 years. Now, for us here at Narrow Road Ventures, we like to look at scripture and see what principles or lessons we can pick that we can learn from in running the businesses that the Lord has entrusted to us. So we are going to look at the church as an enterprise, because the church is an enterprise. It's an organization. It has every trait of an organization. It had a founder. It had the first cohort or team of people that led it with a strategy, looking at the future, looking at growth plans, very clear strategy. When Jesus was leaving the scene, he gave them a roadmap. He gave them a formula. He even defined geographically how the church was going to spread, starting from Jerusalem all the way to the rest of the earth. But what we want to do today is to look at what we have come to know as the fivefold ministry in the church. These are the 5 offices that are defined in Ephesians 4:11, and see whether there is any way that we can benefit from having a similar structure within the enterprises that we run. So our main text for today is going to be Ephesians 4:11 to 13, first part of 13, and it reads, "It was he who gave to some to be apostles, some to be prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service." Preparing God's people for works of service. But he singled out all these offices: apostles, prophets, evangelists, pastors, teachers, to prepare God's people for works of service. Now, as the founder of the church, Jesus had all these offices within him, and we're going to look at specific scriptures that tell us that he was actually all of these things. But as it is with leadership, most times you're supposed to have that overarching vision and abilities, but not to be the one to execute every last thing that you're responsible for. We have teams as leaders. We have people below us, people that we delegate certain aspects of running an organization to. And that's exactly what Jesus did. So he had it all together within himself, had all these 5 offices within himself. But then as we go to the next iteration or the next tier or layer of leadership, then certain people started to demonstrate some of these more clearly than others. So in terms of apostleship, all of them were apostle, but I think Peter and then Paul come out more strongly as apostles of Christ. But all the 12 were apostles because of the proximity that they had to Christ and the fact that they spent time together. So let's look at these scriptures. And as we do so, I want you to start thinking about your business or your organization. These principles, they cut across any nature of organization, be it a non-profit or a for-profit, be it a government institution, whatever it is. These principles, I want to bet that they will apply if you only looked at them clearly. So as we look at how Christ represented each of these, be thinking about your organization or your business. We here at Narrow Road, we focus on enterprises, entrepreneurs, businesses, but even if you're outside of a typical business or enterprise, you can look at this and see how they apply to what you have to do. So, apostleship. So, looking at Hebrews chapter 3 verse 1, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession. Jesus himself, in as much as he was a founder, remember, he had been sent. He kept saying, I am here to do the will of my Father who sent me. So as such, he was on an assignment as an apostle, as a founder. And so we see Jesus being represented in Hebrews 3:1 as an apostle. So was Jesus a prophet? For sure he was. Let's look at Matthew 21:11. And the crowd said, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth. They represented him as a prophet. And even though this was secondary affirmation coming from the crowd, Jesus himself did not deny the fact that he was a prophet. And we know that Jesus prophesied many times, even talking about the longevity of the church when he was talking to Peter about the confession that Peter made. He said that this is my church. I'm building my church rather, and the gates of Hades will not prevail. So he knew what he was up to because he was a prophet. He was able to foretell what was coming. What about evangelist? How do we find Jesus as an evangelist in Scripture? There are many instances that we can see him operating as an evangelist, but I want to pick out the one in Mark 16:15. He said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation, which is exactly what he was doing. An evangelist of the message of the kingdom, of the gospel. So he remember, everywhere he went, he kept preaching and talking about and inviting people to consider living in a way that is consistent to the kingdom that he was presenting. So how do we see him as a pastor? In John 10, he presented himself as the good shepherd. I am the good shepherd. This is John 10:11. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for his sheep. And that's exactly what Jesus did for all of us who are sheep of his pasture. He laid his life literally for us as a good shepherd. He is a pastor. And finally, let's look at Jesus as a teacher. Jesus opened his mouth and he began teaching, saying. That's Matthew 5:2. Jesus opened his mouth and he began to teach, saying. As a teacher, remember many times he was referred to as good teacher. And again, he never denied the fact that he was a teacher. So similarly, for us who are leaders in businesses or founders, we need to have each of these aspects as we start looking at them very clearly and how they relate to what we do today. We need to have some of that in us so that as we work with the people who are below us, the people that the Lord has given to us to work with, then we can start delegating specifically to those individuals. But ultimately, or of ultimate importance, what I want to stress here is that you need to have an aspect of each of these offices built in to your business for you to stand a chance to succeed. So let's look at the idea of apostleship and how it applies to an enterprise. So I did a Google search, very general thing, to see what apostleship means. And it talks about a vigorous and pioneering advocate or supporter of a particular policy, idea, or cause, one who is sent directly by a principal authority. And for people who have started businesses, when you get an idea, a vision is birthed, and you cannot rest until you see this thing coming to being. And that's, in a sense, represents what entrepreneurs are all about. There are people who, something within really, really burning. Then you go out and you start selling your idea. Sometimes people around you look at you and say, wow, this guy is crazy. How can you even start thinking about such an idea? But entrepreneurs, as apostles, this thing is burning within them. And they go out and find people to help them in articulating or implementing that vision or that idea. And most likely, as a vision bearer, for us, again, who are Christians, we do not just say that an idea popped up in my mind. We know that God deposits those ideas, and as such, I am on an assignment based on the vision that the Lord has given me to go and launch this enterprise for His glory and for His purpose. And so apostleship is very, very important to have. Somebody who will make sure that we continue to move in the right direction. And this will probably be your topmost CEO or somebody who has a significant role, or the founder, probably not involved in the business day-to-day running, but is there present, and their spirit is there with you to keep leading you, to keep urging you, to keep encouraging you, and to keep forging forward despite all the odds. That spirit of apostleship is important. It is critical for any business. Let's look at prophecy. This idea of prophet actually is interesting, because especially in the West, we are starting to see titles such as Chief Prophesy Officer. And I'm not kidding. This is something you can just post a video and jump into a search engine and find the title Chief Prophesy Officer. You'll be surprised to see how many organizations that have nothing to do with the faith that have decided to include this title or role within their organization. So the ability to anticipate and predict the future is critical for the longevity of any organization or enterprise. We cannot afford to be reactionary. We need to have that capacity to gauge several years, to look at different trends and and allow those trends to help us determine what future needs will be as far as our clientele services are concerned. We need to have that ability to predict the need, or to predict problems that need to be solved so that we can stay ahead. Prophecy, so to speak, is the bedrock of innovation. When we look at current realities and try to imagine what the future will look like, you need to have that function. We cannot sit down and just wait for things to happen. We will lag behind so many years, especially right now, when there is so much happening in the context of business. AI is a big factor that we need to be anticipating. How is it going to affect the way we do business? How is it going to affect the different roles that we have within organizations? Even as an individual, if you're in a certain career, how is it going to be affected by AI? So that you can start making changes right now that will position you to be able to be relevant when things are not the same as they are some years down the road. So prophecy is very critical for all of us. We need to be able to look out and try and learn from existing trends, from history, to determine what the future may hold. Now, I know for a fact that we might not always be 100% correct as far as anticipating what's coming down the road, but we cannot just afford again to sit and do nothing about our future. We need to plan. We need to cast out our vision out there, 10 years, midterm visions, longer term vision, and so plan with anticipation of what's going to happen in the market and even within your organization. When it comes to evangelism, again, I think companies such as Apple, they already have Chief Evangelism Officers, people who tell stories, people who share the message, people who are always out there speaking about the organization. So for you as a leader or whatever function of evangelism where you might find being a suitable place to locate this role, there are two levels of evangelism. One that is internal and one that is external. Internal evangelism, when a CEO or a leader for that matter is addressing the home crowd or the staff, so to speak, your main role is to keep re-emphasizing the vision, mission, why you're doing what you're doing, and just keep rallying your troops, keep bringing them back to this focal point that defines who you are as an organization. That's internal evangelism. That's a critical part of leadership when you keep reminding. Another way would be even to call it Chief Reminding Officer. You keep reminding your people what it is that you are all about. Externally, wherever you go, keep talking about your story, keep talking about your organization, your services, the difference that you're creating, your unique proposition, the value proposition, the value that you're adding to the market, the problems that you're solving. And so evangelism then becomes a big tool in brand creation, in positioning your brand, both internally and externally. And after evangelism then, we look at the role of a pastor. Now, as a shepherd, as a leader, your organization is made up of people, and people come with all sorts of needs. And your ability to shepherd them so that they are inspired to keep the focus on what's the main thing as far as the organization is concerned, that's a critical aspect, because these people that you're working with, they are the carriers of your vision. They are the feet, the legs, so to speak, of your vision. So they need to be in a position where they are able to effectively carry and implement that vision. We need to have that heart, the heart of a shepherd. And it's interesting as you read through the Gospels now that we are looking and imitating Christ in how he steered this organization. He had time with them. He took care of them. When there was a need, Peter's mother is unwell, he comes in and helps out in that nature. And Jesus spent quality time with these guys, pastoring them, shepherding them, discipling them. And we need to be able to do that with our people, walking with them and going beyond what is required of business, but actually being genuinely concerned about their plight as people, and not just drilling everything down to productivity at the organization. That way you will not be able to win with people. And lastly, we want to talk about teaching. Now, again, looking at Jesus, his main role as he was working with the disciples was teaching them. Now, for us, we need to be able to have ways of building the capacity of the people that are below us, the people that work with us, so that we can continue teaching them in the ways of the business and teaching them to become better people, better servants, better employees, better staff, better whatever it is that they do. We need to be able to teach and to teach them well. Now, to build capacity, we have to continually train our people, and that's where the teaching aspect comes in. So I don't know whether you've been able to pinpoint how all these roles fit within your organization, but I guess that you will be able to do so. But it is critical to remember that even as Jesus was here, some very interesting statistics. He was only here for 3 years, working on building this structure, but he did it so effectively. And he was working with a team of largely unschooled people, most of them fishermen. There was probably a tax collector. I don't know what kind of credentials one needed to be a tax collector. But hey, he was able to do such a wonderful, wonderful job. And I think there are lessons. We will look at one about the founders specifically. But when 3 years were over and he felt that he had done sufficient work in empowering his people, he was able to step out of the scene and allowed them to roll and grow and just shine in what they were doing. And I guess that is what the call is for all of us, especially those of us who are founders of businesses. May it not be that we want to be control freaks, to be there and ensure that everything has to be done in a way that is 100% consistent with the way I would want to do things. Now, Peter, who was left in charge of the church, had a lot of faults, but Jesus trusted him. He empowered him. He gave him a chance. He believed in him, and that's exactly what we are supposed to do with those that are below us. So again, we want to be to ensure that apostleship is present, that prophecy is present, that evangelism is present, that pastoring is present, and that teaching is present within our organization, because we also, as organizations, we are about serving people. And remember, when we looked at the scripture here, it says that these offices were there to prepare God's people for works of service. So may you be prepared for works of service. Thank you.